Hello and welcome back to INMR, where today we're going to be talking about the Brighton game. Just got back. It was horrendous, to say the least. Crystal Palace 3, Brighton 1. So I sort of wanted to talk about my thoughts around that game and what went wrong, because at the start of this winter run, these were supposed to be the easy run of fixtures. We'd come off the back of the start of a season where we beat Tottenham, City. You come off the back of those runs thinking that when there's the easier fixtures, such as the Southamptons, the Leicesters, and let's be realistic, the Crystal Palaces, that they're going to be easy games, 3-0s, 4-0s, 3 points, racking them up before Christmas. But it hasn't been that at all. Our most difficult game, in my opinion, so far has been Bournemouth, and they're the only team we've beaten. Yet these simple games where you have to win, and there's not really any way in which anyone can fathom them not winning, somehow Brighton have gone and lost. They've drawn, they've done this, they've done that. It's just not good enough. So in terms of what went wrong, I'm probably going to be a bit all over the place in sort of my analysis of the game, because things went wrong at different points. So I could talk about something that happened at the start and then go into the substitutions, then back to the first half. Firstly, I want to talk about the starting lineup. The back four I didn't mind. I think it was the best of what you could have had. Dunk, we'll get onto that later in terms of starting over Igor, but this game is a game that you need for Joel Veltman for. He's injured, we didn't get that. Apart from that, it was a pretty typical back line. In the midfield holding, we had Baleba and Ayari. Again, I don't mind. I'd prefer to have Hinshelwood there, but we don't have that. A lot of my preferred starting 11 were out, so that's just, it is what it is. The thing I had the problem with the most was João Pedro as the 9 and Jorginho in behind him. Pedro is not best used as a number 9. He loses that creative spark. The reason Pedro is so good, yes, he's clinical, yes, he's excellent in front of goal, but it's his link-up play that makes him so much better. So having him up there on his own was a recipe for disaster before it even started. He was so isolated in those first 15-20 minutes when he was performing quite well, and then as everything sort of went wrong for Brighton, it appeared he wasn't doing anything, when actually he was alright for the first quarter of the game. But as everything fell apart, you noticed it more on him because he wasn't as impactful as he usually is, and that's because he was playing too high, in my opinion. I think if you can't have Welbeck, either swap Jorginho and Pedro and have Pedro as the second striker linking up the play, because Ruta doesn't do it nearly as well as Pedro does, or take the risk, it's Palace at the end of the day, give Ferguson a start, because he can finish off those chances that Pedro would have been creating. And towards the end, because he was so isolated, you didn't even know Pedro was there. He really drifted out of the game, and by his standards was totally invisible. And moving on to Lewis Dunk, I think in this game, you missed the senior figures, you missed the experienced players such as Welbeck and Veltman, but the one that we didn't miss was Lewis Dunk. He just wasn't on it. The whole defence was poor, but he especially disappointed me because Igor was so excellent in his absence and then was immediately benched as soon as Dunk was back. But at the minute, Dunk hasn't proven that he deserves to start over Igor. And I get that he's captain, it's leadership. There was no leadership there today. I didn't see him lift them. He's going to sort them out. There was never that moment. He didn't help himself by, being abnormally soft in a challenge. And I felt that for the whole defence. I thought Van Heck as well was slow on the ball, misplaced passes, which you rarely see, ran into trouble. And as I say, it goes back to that thing. This was supposed to be an easy run, so why are some of our highest quality players struggling? For me, that comes down to the question of mentality. Are these players going, it's Palace, it's Southampton, we'll win, and then suddenly getting shocked and in the middle of the game being like, what on earth do we do now? They're playing superbly on these big occasions against the likes of Manchester City, but when it comes to playing sides that are fighting relegation, are we being cocky? Are we thinking it's easy, 3 points in the bag, and then being stunned? My final points on the defence will be the two fullbacks. Estupiñán, I thought, took Matoma's space a lot of the time. It was very congested on that left-hand side due to Estupiñán going to overlap and then actually holding off. So Matoma then couldn't go for the one-on-one and he had to pass it back, and we just find ourselves in that circle of Matoma running. He can't do the one-on-one, but also Estupiñán stopped making his overlapping run. And now we've got to pass back to Estupiñán, who's going to pass back to Van Heck, across, back. you saw it coming from a mile off when Estupiñán wasn't making those runs. If he's gonna burst forward and commit to overloading those flanks, he needs to do it. He needs to make that last stretch down the line and then whip across into the box, because otherwise he's just taking up Mitoma's space. On the right hand side, Minte hardly had any action in the first half. I think he had 8 touches in the first half from what I saw. And out of all those 4 wide players, I think Lamptey was the biggest threat going forward, but unfortunately defensively he's so poor. And once again that comes back to missing Veltman's experience. Veltman always shows up in the Palace games, and it showed today how much we missed him. Baleba I thought was good, but his final pass was off on quite a few occasions. He was given the man of the match award. I don't think anyone deserved the man of the match award. I think the fans did, in all honesty, for sitting through it, the ones that stayed for the full 90, because it was just atrocious. I think that's potentially the worst Brighton game I've been at in recent years, and for it to come against Palace, where by the end you felt that the only players actually trying were Gruder and Enciso, is diabolical. In terms of the goals conceded, again it just comes down to not being dominant in set pieces. The crosses as well, the second one coming from a cross just in the air, we're not dominant at all. And then obviously in the second half we changed from a back 4 to a back 3, with either Estupiñán sitting and shuffling, or when Estupiñán went, Baleba would sit. For the first 10-15 minutes it looked as though it was going to make an impact. You thought maybe Brighton would go and score, but after that 10-15 minutes where they didn't, it's almost like the players went, oh, we haven't scored, never mind. And then it all became a bit lethargic and almost like they were just putting 50% in. They were just going through the motions, and then it was back to them passes where Mitoma gets it, plays it back to Estupiñán, over to Dunk, over to Van Hecke, out to Minte, back to Van Hecke, and it was just, I get they were trying to move the Palace players around in the box, but it was just so, it never looked like Brighton were going to penetrate that defence, because it truly looked as if the majority of players weren't trying. And I think that's what's aggravating so many fans. On the way out you could just see people just felt as if there was no effort being put in. And the third one, those tactical changes that were made were obviously very attacking, in the hopes that Brighton would go and get 3. And of course with that attacking approach comes the risk of leaving the defence wide open, and with someone as pacey as Ismaïla Sarr, we saw him last year at Marseille, what he could do in the Europa League, and he's joined Palace and gone and done it for them instead. So very frustrating, because that Brighton defence knew what Sarr was about and still couldn't handle him. But that third goal comes part and parcel with playing attacking football when you're 2-0 down. So a very disappointing game. Brighton now 4 without a win, that last win coming at the Vitality Stadium at the end of November. So next up, Brighton have got West Ham, and that is a must win. Once again, one that should be a simple win, but we've proved that those sorts of games aren't. That is as easy as it gets before this winter run sort of gets a lot more difficult. After that it's Brentford, Villa and Arsenal. This is sort of Brighton's last chance to pick up points against the teams that they really should have. This should have been 6 games unbeaten for sure. After that Bournemouth game it should be 6 games unbeaten, and then you go into the Brentford and Villa games very confident that you can go and get something from it. Instead, 2 draws, 2 losses. 3 of those 4 teams are in the bottom 5, I believe. It's just woeful. So yeah, gutted, of course. You never want to lose against Palace, especially not at home. But at the end of the day, the game's done. That's it. Next week is West Ham, and an opportunity to wipe the slate clean. That is where I'm going to end today's podcast, but there are plenty of others you can go and listen to. For more content, be sure to check out my website. That's inmrfootball.co.uk. On there you can find match reports, live blogs, club updates and so much more. And if that's not enough, INMR is also on X and Instagram, so you can go and follow me on both of those platforms for more daily football content. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.